Journalist Don DeBar, journalist and political commentator. Don DeBar, welcome back to the Soapbox.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, I think that we'll put your website and stuff in the show notes, and we'll
Okay.
get right. I think you've been on enough that people kind of know who you are. You're a journalist, CPR Metro, right?
Yeah, and I'm in Facebook jail right now and Twitter jail.
Mm.
Yep.
I was in Twitter jail for a week recently. I don't
I'm
care.
doing.
I don't really do Twitter that much, but
I'm doing concurrent sentences.
it was like, and it didn't never happen until Elon Musk became the owner of Twitter. Did I ever? I just have like this fake account that I just honestly use to harass politicians, and they don't even read their Twitter feed, so I don't even know I have it. But anyway, all right. So I want to talk about Ukraine. I want to talk about the fake propaganda that Russia bombed Poland and killed
Mm.
a couple of people. But before we get into that, I have a something that has been an issue for quite a while. So, I was speaking at an event in Los Angeles last week. It was for the Children's Health Defense. That's Robert Kennedy Jr.'s organization to defend children, and nobody's against that. And so, in the talk I gave, my thing is the first thing that they did when they started the COVID narrative was to divide worker against worker. There were essential workers and there were non-essential workers.
Right.
And I said, as a socialist, I believe that all work is essential and that we can't like prioritize somebody's, occupation over another person's occupation because even if they don't deem it essential to societies, it's essential to the family, it's essential to the well-being of the person. And there were many people who were out of work for months and months and months. And so, um, getting, and my daughter is a massage therapist, so she didn't get unemployment. Well, she had to really like work for it to to get a
Yeah.
little bit of unemployment, right?
Right. Right.
So, anyway, after the meeting, this guy came up to me and he said, you might have been kidding, or I might have heard you wrong, but I thought I heard you say you're a socialist. And I was like, I did say I'm a socialist. I am a socialist. And he's like, so you think people should have free housing and stuff? I said, yeah, if they need it, I think
Yeah.
they should.
What's
And
wrong with free housing?
that's socialism. That's kind of humanism, right? And so I just got to thinking about it. Ever since the COVID narrative started, they've been saying that everything, all the fascist measures, all of the mandates, and the Supreme Court has knocked down the idea that even in a state of a health emergency, you can't abrogate the Constitution. So they've been saying, oh, Gavin Newsom's a socialist. Oh, Biden's a socialist. And, all of these measures were socialist when they were really authoritarian or totalitarian and nothing about socialism. Do you have and then I thought, one more thing. Should, even because a lot of our socialist comrades kind of accepted and took on the mantle of totalitarians by saying, you must do this, you can't do that, follow the government, and et cetera, et cetera. So, your comment on attributing, totalitarian, neo-fascist measures to socialism, and B, could we better say we're like Marxists or whatever instead of like identifying as a socialist, since that identifies with Bernie Sanders, who's an imperialist, with Joe Biden, who's a whatever he is, right? Go.
He's an Alzheimerist.
Yeah.
Um, no. I mean, the problem that we have is with language. Um,
Mhm.
And we're talking about things not in the real world, but in the realm of the ideological, literally of ideas, not of things.
Mm-hmm.
The language itself has been deliberately bastardized over the years, affirmatively by misuse of terms in public discussion in an exclusive condition. So with the public discussion is controlled and the misuse permeates. No one is there contesting these terms when they're used. So we have, first of all, Republicans who are identified as a party of the right with the color red, which is the color of socialism since the beginning of the term. Really.
I know. Whenever I see vote red or vote blue, I'm always like, I wish I could really vote red.
Then you also, and Democrats as socialists or leftists with the color blue, which was the color of the monarchy in France, if I remember correctly, or of the Republicans in France. The actual term, I mean, there is this thing came out of the 19th century called scientific socialism. It's a way of trying to make political science out of the political philosophy and economic and ideological philosophy. I think the term was coined by Marx and Engels. I could be wrong. I'm old, and some of those things are
Maybe Lenin.
And also over the years by Lenin and others, Stalin also, and many others.
And Chavez Hugo Chavez was a big proponent of scientific socialism and socialism for the 21st century.
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thing, right? It's like the material conditions. It's kind of.
I mean, specifically, the term socialism has to do with the working class taking control of the means of production. Now, this was originally conceived of under the 19th century economic and political conditions. Factory workers in the main. These terms were expanded in terms of understanding as the application of the theory showed new realities or enhanced the understanding of reality that came in the minds of some brilliant people in the middle of the 19th century, but they weren't God. And so the conditions in Russia after the, in the midst of World War I and after the first revolution indicated or illustrated that, in fact, rather than the revolution coming first, as Marx had envisioned, and maybe a literal read of the theory might indicate, being in the most advanced, in terms of economic development, capitalist countries, of being Germany and France and Britain at the time in Europe. It came in Russia, which was in some ways more backwards, but the working class included the class that were sort of a legacy of feudalism, but the agricultural workers is what the peasants were in essence. Both the factory workers and the agricultural workers stood in relation to the means of production in the same way, and that is they were alienated from them. Somebody owned the factories, not the workers. Somebody owned the farms, not the workers. The factories made products because of the labor of the factory workers. The farms made products because of the labor of the farm workers.
Mm-hmm.
Lenin saw this. Mao Zedong saw this. Others saw this, and they used these things. And so socialism came to mean, under those conditions, a particular style where a state was created and was taken, at least nominally, into the hands of the workers. In Russia, actually, it originally was in the hands of the workers, in the hands of workers' councils or Soviets. That's what the term means, workers' council. And over time, and due to a number of conditions, including being attacked by the capitalist countries from the minute there was a socialist revolution in Russia in 1917 through at least 1945 and really straight through 1991, and you could argue today, but not for nothing, the largest project in the history of mankind in terms of dollars has been to take down that revolution in the Soviet Union. And so aside from not being able to build a communist paradise on the ashes of a feudal society in 1917 in the midst of war, Cold War, and everything else. There were responses in order to hold the state together that some people here characterize as the deformed worker state, but it was basically a form of state where it operated in the name of the workers, but it was controlled from the center and had to be. And there are some strong, very beneficial aspects to that. They built an industrial society in a generation. And there were some things that were also, difficult for the people that were there. I would contrast those, however, to the development of the industrial society in the West, which involved at its basis genocide and slavery. That wasn't part of the mix in developed. So, long story short, it's maybe a little late for that already. Socialism came to mean in the minds of people that model, that and even communism, which it wasn't. It was building communism. Socialism was basically where the state owned the means of production. The theory being that the people owned the state, and thus it was socialism. The reality is, when the workers own the means of production, that's socialism. That can take a variety of forms depending on where you are and what your enemies are up to. None of those things apply to the Democratic Party or any of our politicians, certainly not Bernie Sanders.
Right. I think it's a really important discussion. And what was really interesting was after my talk, and this is kind of why I posted on Facebook, is like everybody's so concerned with me offending other people, but they don't give a crap about offending me, right? And so, I know. And so she was like, after my talk, she was like, I just need to stress that, CHD, Children's Health Defense, is apolitical, and we welcome people of all political and social orientation, conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, whatever. And I was like, oh, and that's great. And, I never mean to offend nice people, but I don't take it back anything I say either. So, but then the thing is, like, they wanted me, some of the people there wanted me to speak at an event the next day, but the leader of the CHD who said that about me, she also said, well, she the gist was she thought that I said too many bad things about Trump, and that they don't like socialists either, but they welcome everybody except socialists, right? All the political stripes. So they're the same people they're the box people, right? We got everything's acceptable in that box, but don't step outside of that box. And so that's just and I want to, because everybody there, we agreed on certain things, but I just want them to understand that, and maybe I shouldn't have used the word socialist, because sometimes a barrier is erected, but I was in Santa Monica in Los Angeles, which isn't a conservative, it's not a conservative place, but that as long as we keep erecting these barriers based on labels or thinking, because everybody who, and I bashed everybody. I bashed Trump, Clinton, Biden, Obama, Nancy Pelosi. So really, Trump was actually the only Republican. I didn't even bash him. But anyway, if we keep thinking that we can't work with people because there's these label barriers, then I essentially think we're screwed.
Yeah. I mean, this is a question that people have been grappling with. I go back again to the 19th century. And, here we're talking about the question of slavery and of suffrage, of women's rights in the United States. And very famous quotation about I will work with anyone to do right, and I will work with no one to do wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the situation we're talking about here. Look, one of the problems that we have is history. This is a problem all of us have. Is one of we are what we are because of history, for better or worse. One of the items in the worst column, I would say, is the legacy of anti-socialist and anti-communist activity in the United States, the Cold War and more. Really, the bosses, as they put it back in the day, have turned these words and terminology that even anything having to do with the concept of worker ownership or management, or they're sacrilegious terms in the religion of Americanism or American exceptionalism. This economy supposedly was built with the industriousness of the people here, and the small shopkeeper, the guild member, et cetera, so goes the mythology. And those who seek to collectivize, quote unquote, to use an unfortunate term from the 20s and 30s, really seek to just accrue power to themselves at the center, and they would like to dominate the world under that model. That's the mythology. There's certainly a group of people who, if they saw a way from here to there, that are in positions of power here, would gladly do that. I would point out that they've accumulated their power actually under the capitalist mode of production, monopoly capitalism, and that's what they've brought. Marx, the genius of Marx, looking at 150 years ago at these phenomena, or 170 years ago, said that those very conditions create the conditions for socialism, in that once some small elite has assembled everything into one giant machine, you no longer need the machine operator or the machine assembler, only the workers to keep it running. And so, this is a contradiction that, of course, that they face all the time. It's the thing that made Marx and Engels originally believe that the revolution would come in the most advanced capitalist countries, because the conditions you would get there first. Anyway, the legacy that I'm talking about is that when someone, you can see it in the assembling of like these, what's the word? There's a technical word in political science, but like these cohorts, these groupings of different constituencies. Trump, Sanders also to a degree, but Trump especially, his campaign assembled different cohorts than had traditionally been organized in the electorate. You had people that vote Democrat or vote Republican, some people that vote sort of lefty, progressive, some people that vote sort of righties, crypto fascists, whatever. Trump picked off, for example, in Florida, got both the Cuban immigrant community, they're hard right-wingers, and also the Haitian immigrant community, which is hard left-wingers. Both, he carried them in Florida. That was one part of what they did to assemble, the victory, the electoral college victory, but it was done, with precision. These groupings, as it's been put before by Marx and others, they come to the party wearing the clothes that they have on. Among the Republican base, quote unquote, anti-communism is a very, it's a glue. It was used to assemble national votes for, since the 30s, really, against Roosevelt even, and certainly since McCarthy's era. And so Trump, if he's going to speak to, an audience that's going to turn out and vote for him, has to massage that. Forget what he wants to. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the phenomenology around this, because that's the part we have to live with. And so your question really hangs on, well, what is a proper methodology or a proper technique of propaganda, of public relations, when we're trying to assemble a coalition of people who have all these barriers that are erected around them already,
Mm-hmm.
and they come, how do we not show them the barriers and instead show them what's beyond them, the commonalities and the essence? It's a good question. I wish I knew the answer, because I wouldn't be running such a long line of BS here. I would have just said, like this. I don't know the answer.
Right.
Has to be
Okay.
done.
All right. And there has to be some kind of clear understanding of terminology that we certainly don't have. And also something that you're very good at is a clear understanding of geopolitics. You know, is like what really constitute a socialist or communist state or society, and you know, how is it, if we want to label a state or a society as communist or socialist or whatever, you know, what does that really mean? You know, instead of the propaganda of, you know, Russian soldiers being forced to take Viagra to rape Ukrainian, you know, boys and girls or whatever they were saying. So speaking of that, we have this scandal, I think, in the Associated Press, the AP. And of course, they have never, it's been a long time since they've been objectively reporting the news, if they ever did. And so recently, they wrote an article that quoted U.S. Insider, somebody in the government, a government insider. And it said that Russia deliberately fired a missile into Poland, and it killed a couple people, a few people, whatever. We're not minimizing that. Wherever the missile came from, that's a tragedy. But there were reporters on the ground who were able to take pictures of it and clearly showed that it was not fired from Russia. It wasn't maybe a Russian missile. I'm still confused about that. I've seen that it was a Russian missile, but it was fired from Ukraine. It was not a Russian missile that was fired from Ukraine. But another thing is that the reporter has now been fired who put that out, but AP has clear guidelines. They will not reveal an anonymous source unless that anonymous source gives them false information. And they have, as up to right now, have not revealed who that liar was. And we know how dangerous these lies are and how they get people murdered. My son, you know, included. We had the first Gulf War, the Iraqi soldiers throwing babies out of incubators in Ukraine, you know, all the lies that led up to Iraq and Afghanistan and now Ukraine. And so this reporting could have, I mean, if we weren't lucky enough to have photographers and real journalists right there on the scene, we might not even be here right now.
That's right. You know, our family lost two of my cousins after one of those lies, one in 1966 and one in 1969 in Vietnam.
Wow.
After the Gulf of Tonkin lie about the second incident that supposedly happened, it didn't. You know, they were lying about the Maine back in 1898. So this is that's the nature of the beast here.
Mm-hmm.
The news media is part and parcel of the state. This is one of the problems with people's understanding of what we are here, basically. Mm-hmm. The term totalitarianism, which you used earlier, was crafted to describe the Soviet system in particular. And the term was a pejorative, referring to the fact that rather than having private ownership of industry and private ownership of some of the other aspects of life, the state owned everything, that this was totality of control basically in the hands of the state that was akin to like a pre-Magna Carta monarchy, only with a small collective operating as the regent. And so people compare the U.S. system to that, not in terms of substance, but in terms of form. And so there's private ownership of industry. 6 guys own it, all of it, but that's private ownership.
The media.
The media. The media is a separate private enterprise, commercial. The only reason they have the right to control the printing press is because they own it. And hey, someday when you own a printing press, you can do that too. You'll never be able to own a printing press, but someday, maybe. And so all power has accrued to this smallest group in the history of humanity, the most power with the widest reach and the deepest reach in history. And that in terms of, if you want to play semantics, that's about as totalitarian as it gets when it's total.
Right.
And they've used the term themselves in terms of, intelligence gathering and eavesdropping and all of that, the total information awareness and all these different programs that they've dropped billions and billions of our dollars into are all designed to just basically feed power into the center. And that, unlike in the past, the system runs away, the masses find it intolerable. We're finally going to do something. You and I are fighting over every little thing, but today we're going to go get that guy. We're going to fix that. We used to know who it was. It was the king or the queen, where they lived in the castle, where the castle was. We could go there, drag the son of a gun out by his or her robe and cut the damn head off or whatever we had to do. Problem solved for 10 minutes or whatever. We don't even know who that is now. We don't know where they are.
Right.
Now, this is one of the things about, just a quick digression, about that January 6th so-called insurrection.
Yeah.
Let's say the guy with the horns, gets himself ensconced inside Nancy Pelosi's office. He's got guards outside and he stays there for, forever. What exactly is he going to be able to do from there? Can he call the Pentagon and send out a squad of planes to attack somebody? Hell no. Can he call IRS and have them audit some of his enemies? No. Can he call the Office of Management and Budget and say, cut me a check for $1 billion, I'm going on vacation with my girlfriend? No. We don't actually know where the real levers of power are. And this is more obvious now that we have basically look, I'm 68 years old and I might well be an Alzheimer's or a dementia patient any minute myself. Right. That's what we have sitting in the seat of power.
Right.
Obviously being directed from the outside. Who's directing them? And by what right are they there? And are they the actual power center or are they agents of some other thing? But we have no idea who's running the show.
Well, obviously it's billionaires now, and billionaires are pulling the strings, in some cases loaning money or buying, like Elon Musk, buying computers and, internet connection for Ukraine, and other people donating drones to Ukraine. All these rich people now getting involved in the military hardware of war. It used to be funneled through the U.S. Arms dealers, and now it's incredible.
I know
what's happening.
But Kanye West, billionaire. Bill Cosby, billionaire. They weren't allowed to do things. Bill Cosby was trying to buy NBC, if memory serves, right before all these, allegations came out. Not passing on the merits of those, and I have no idea. That's not the point. He was a billionaire, and he was not allowed to express power in that way.
Yeah, so but they're like barely over the line billionaires. I'm talking about these hundreds, tens of billionaires.
That may be it. I'm
Maybe
just saying,
almost trillion, maybe almost going into the
or
trillionaire.
gazillion,
Yeah.
whatever.
The one crap billion
Yeah.
dollars.
So, but I don't know. I mean, is it that, or is it something else? Because if it's about being a billionaire by some fluke, I invent or steal software from IBM or whatever, and suddenly I'm a 50 or 100 billionaire.
Uh-huh.
Does that mean I'm now suddenly the guys who are in charge of the world say, "Oh, come on in"? Does it
I
work that
don't know.
way?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, me
It's a good
neither.
question. Yeah.
I doubt it myself, but this. So whatever that is, we
Well,
don't know,
mhm.
and we got a hard way to go to figure it out. And I don't know if we have to. I mean, that's a whole other matter.
Well, I also know that billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they own, and Mark Zuckerberg own social media and media companies, that tell us what we can think, what we can't think, or what we're not supposed to think. And they allow us to post what they find acceptable within that little box, and step over the line and you're in jail for, however long they deem, that is appropriate. There's no appeals. There's no court. There's, nothing that you
Right.
can do to try and get our message across. So, the only thing I think that saved us over these years with the consolidation of the media and the power and all of the money into the hands of fewer and fewer people is that we have been able to do independent media. And there's a few independent medias that are, that have the same reach as these people, like Joe Rogan. But there's most of us don't, but all put together, I think we've had an amazing positive influence
It's a quilt
on people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a quilt. I mean, a few hundred people see this. Each of those few hundred people have a few hundred, a few thousand friends. They see things, and it's one thing when we're all seeing in reality what's happening, and the official discussion is something else, and we're not talking to each other. Each of us, is like, after a while, I must be losing my mind or something, because I think I see these things, but everybody says they're not there. When you have cracks in that, it flows. It's like water in a dam. You get a couple of cracks, and next thing you know, the water's running straight through it. And so this is now not. They have computers that analyze this stuff real time as it's being done and distributed or whatever. And I'm sure that they're sharpening techniques for interfering with it and manipulating it and weaponizing it, etc. But it seems that they're standing on sort of shifting sand. Also, it's eroding under their feet because the conditions that they've created kind of carry their own doom. And this is a frantic effort to stall the process. I don't know. I don't know how it ends, but I think it's important that we continue to talk with each other and to try to explain what each of us is seeing around us to each other, so that we can get some clarity on what's real and what's not. And I think the social media is useful.
Yeah, it's also important to, when I said like, if there wasn't a real journalist on the scene showing us what really happened when the missiles hit Poland, that we might not be here. That's not hyperbole. That's not like, it's not like Hillary Clinton or Condi Rice saying, "Oh, don't let the smoking gun be a mushroom cloud." It's nothing like that. It's like reality-based analysis.
Look, either the weapon itself was fired to trigger Article 5 of NATO and create an actual state of war between NATO and Russia, or the incident was immediately captured and weaponized towards that end.
Right.
The State Department has not been shy about its goal being to take down the Russian state and divide Russia into multiple parts. They've been hosting symposia with various groups that consider themselves legacy nationalities, pre-Russian Federation nationalities inside Russia. who should be entitled to their own homeland along the same theory as Bosnia, all these different places where Yugoslavia used to be. That, by the way, was also a goal enunciated by Adolf Hitler when he wrote his little book in jail in 1922, that Russia should be split up into constituent pieces and it'd be much more easily ruled that way. And so we find out in the counter from the Russian government, and also this is in the law. There's an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. But Russia's nuclear doctrine is legal under the current standard. We will use nuclear weapons in one of two cases: A, in retaliation for use of nuclear weapons against us, or B, when some other party induces a condition that threatens the existence of our state. Mm-hmm. We've heard actual, calls and claims for regime change in Russia from the U.S. government since this war began in February. They've tried to sanction, cause a collapse, and they've tried to do what they've been trying to do to Iran, what they've been doing to Syria, what they tried to do to Libya. And in this particular case, this incident could have provided air cover. Here's the thing. If you look at, I was doing a program with Press TV yesterday, and this occurred to me, and I think it's a good example. If you look at the cases of Libya and Syria parallel to each other, the U.S. government, Langley, whoever the hell makes policy, they went after them both at the same time, beginning in February of 2011, overtly at the UN. Libya came up on the agenda of the Security Council first. Resolution 1970 and 1973 authorized the imposition of a no-fly zone and the imposition of sanctions, no weapon sales and all of that. That was used as an excuse for the U.S. said it was authorization for an aerial bombardment of Libya, of targets in Libya that began March 20th, 2011 and ended October 20th, 2011. For an idea of what that was, Libya had 6 million people at the time in about a dozen cities. And all of those cities were bombed about 12 hours a day for that period, from March until October. I was talking with Cynthia McKinney in June when she was in Tripoli with some people from the African Union who were there to observe the bombing that day. There was an 11.5 hour thing. They counted 82 explosions that they heard that day. And this is what happened across the country. Now, that was enabled by this resolution. As soon as the bombing started, they made the move against Syria also. Now, in each case, they had agitated the people and sent in jihadis, basically, to start a terrorist campaign on the ground. In Libya, you had a bombing campaign coordinate with a terrorist campaign on the ground. In Syria, when the resolutions came up for a no-fly zone, Russia and China vetoed it. And then, within a couple of years, as the Syrian state stabilized the situation, they asked Russia to come in, and Russia began to conduct an air war against the invaders. Today, of course, Libya is in the state that it's in, and Syria is actually stable. I mean, the U.S. is occupying part of it. They're still conducting their war, but Syria won. It's 11 years later. This incident was intended, in my opinion, to enable a NATO air campaign against Ukraine, which, of course, obviously would have been a NATO air campaign against Russia. Right. And it was, the U.S. media was hyping it even after it was known that that was an S-300 anti-aircraft missile that was either, it was an air defense. So the only ones firing air defense missiles were the Ukrainians. It was either accidentally launched in defense of Lvov, which is under attack at that time, or it was intentionally launched into Poland in order to create an incident. Whichever it was, after it became known, government officials here, most of the U.S. media, and Zelensky himself still insisted that it was the Russians for at least a day, trying to sell in Article 4, which is the convening of a mission to discuss, seeking Article 5, in other words, a state of war between Russia and Ukraine. There's a parallel track. I know this is kind of wordy, but there's a lot going on. Michael McFaul, 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 who was the former U.S. ambassador to Russia under the Obama administration. He has a Twitter account. He teaches at Stanford now. He's been there for a while. God help us all. He's teaching our kids. He has been assembling packages of materials that I assume he has as grad students or whomever, some clinic they have there on, psychotic foreign policy or whatever. These different things that are intended to induce regime change and a dismemberment of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this guy who speaks, I know Putin, you don't know him. I'm telling you what you have to do. In order to make peace with him, you have to make war against him. This kind of pronouncement on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that this is not outlier positioning.
Right.
Keep in mind that Biden's role in Ukraine was as vice president to Obama, while this guy was the ambassador to Moscow.
Right.
And their policy, the policy out of him right now, one of the 6 items that he's making demands is that Russia be listed by the State Department as a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, if that happens, and we have another attempt for that took place at NATO yesterday, where some NATO advisory council was calling on all the members to categorize Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. One of the things that happens right away is that for having this conversation, you and I can go take Lynn Stewart's cell for providing material support to terrorists.
Wow.
That's where they're going with this.
Mm-hmm. Right. So cooler heads prevailed in that instance. And like you said, we have nobody that we can trust that has a cool head in Washington, D.C. We don't even know if anybody, if the POTUS is thinking at all about anything. So I guess we just have to trust that there are real journalists, real reporters, and that there are more stable factors in Russia. That's the only thing, and China that we can trust. But do you have any comments? We are getting a little lengthy. Do you have any comments about the FTX thing and the scandal of the money laundering with it in Ukraine?
Well, there's a tradition of that as well. It's Iran-Contra that showed us just one possible formation of okay. So we have a constitution, for better or worse. It was created in the condition of an ongoing genocide and human slavery, human trafficking.
Right.
Intended to preserve at least their right to conduct those activities, if not the activities themselves. Mm-hmm. And tailored around them, like 3/5, for example.
Right.
Nevertheless, there's this little pesky part of that Constitution called the Bill of Rights that for some reason, over the years, the courts have humored us with enforcing from time to time. I wouldn't say aggressively or across the board, but from time to time. And I know it's a real inconvenience for power to have to submit to any rules or the appearance of submitting to any rules, but it's happened. Well, so there are some things that are patently illegal under the tests that have been accumulated, issued by the courts in interpreting the Constitution, and they have to do, among other things, with protecting privacy of people. The government's not allowed to snoop on you without a warrant. However, they're very creative people that we have in public service have determined that if you have private companies that accumulate all the information they can about each and every individual, and then they sell that to each other, of course, harmlessly, like to market. Gee, who likes red? All those people, great, let's sell them red dresses, or whatever. That, coincidentally, some of this information happened to fall into the government's pocket.
Oh,
yeah, we know everything about everybody. How'd that happen?
Yeah.
This is something that they do across the board, where the substance of the law is completely and totally violated with some formal compliance. The government didn't spy on anyone. All they did was buy the files of the private guy who spied on everyone with our money, by the way. But, you're not supposed to bribe politicians. That's illegal. You're not supposed to take money without reporting the source as a politician. That's illegal.
Right.
You're not supposed to swindle depositors if you're doing banking operations or currency exchange. That's illegal. Somehow, gee whiz, I don't know how it happened. All this money from investors ended up in the pockets of guys in Ukraine and Democratic Party politicians right before I filed bankruptcy and left the jurisdiction.
Right.
So this is an American tradition. I don't know what happened. It's designed so that you can't know. But you can look at the effects. The money was here. Now it's there and there. Something happened.
They say follow the money.
That's right. Follow the money.
And who benefits.
Yeah, right.
So Don, thank you so much for doing the Soapbox. Tell our listeners like your website and stuff like that.
Okay, well, I can't post to Facebook for another 11 days, I think, or something, but other people are posting interesting things there. So Don DeBar at Facebook. Also on Twitter, I think next weekend, so I would say December 2nd or 3rd or something, I'll be able to post there again. I post there frequently. It's at Don DeBar, DonDebar. I have an account at vk.com, which is like Facebook, but without Zuckerberg and without the restrictions. And I'm Don DeBar there, DonDebar. And also I have an account on Trump Twitter, Truth Social. It's called truthsocial.com. And I also have a YouTube page with a few hundred videos that we update every few days. Probably this will be there too. And that's youtube.com/Don DeBar, DonDebar.
Awesome. All right, Don, again, thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's always great having you.
Yeah.
Peace out.
I love you. Take care of yourself. Thank you.
Love you too.